Social media in today's day and age is quite difficult to navigate. There's obviously a lot of content. There's a lot of keeping up with everything, the new platforms that are coming out. If you're an editor, I think you have to really know the platforms in and out and know the algorithms and what people tend to watch on those different platforms. Because if you're creating something for TikTok or YouTube Shorts or even YouTube or Facebook, all of them require different forms of editing style or information or how you actually present that clips to the people.
So there's some research that they research with children in China and Russia. What do you want to be when you grow up, or what career? And they said engineer and other careers like that. And when they ask kids in America, they said, I want to be a YouTuber. Yeah. So is YouTube a career? What should be the purpose of social media?
I think it's a difficult one to answer because I think everyone's experience is going to be different. You have smaller YouTube channels, for example, or smaller Instagram or TikTok, I'm going to say platforms that make a lot of money, whether that's through endorsement or through advertisement in terms of someone sponsoring the channel. And some people make good amount of money as views. I think running it as a business, personally, from my experience so far, is difficult until you get your numbers right in every single department. But as a YouTuber, if you're just one or two people doing it, I think you can manage that.
Is YouTube about making money?
I think YouTube is more about a new form of media that allows people the platform to express whatever they want to express, where before 20 years ago, it wasn't there. So people could only watch TV to get a certain funnel type of media. Now you have access to everyone's content. So if I have an idea, I can just create whatever I want, put it out there, and anyone can access it. And I think that's the beauty of social media. It comes with its own drawbacks because then you get a whole array of different problems that come with.
What are the drawbacks of social media?
I think the drawbacks of social media, mainly, number one is right now is the filtering. So you can't necessarily talk about some things or show some things that don't abide by the main agenda that's being pushed. Yeah. And if you have a certain opinion about some things, I think you get filtered. That's one of the drawbacks. And another drawback is you then get the other side is where you're in the influx of media that you don't want, for example, children to see. It gets pushed and there's so much of it that you can't avoid. So if you leave your child to go on YouTube, for example, if you don't pay attention to what they're watching, you could easily go down a rabbit hole. Then the next thing they're watching something that you completely disagree with morally.
What can kids see on YouTube that's dangerous?
I mean, I've seen some funky stuff, man. I'm talking about cartoons that are pushing an agenda that you shouldn't necessarily push at that age for a child. Yeah. Whether that's
like what?
About sexuality, whether that's about the way they communicate with their parents. Or for example, I've seen a cartoon where two men were raising a gender neutral child. And I'm like...
In the cartoon?
In the cartoon. And I'm like, at that age, like a 3-4-year-old that it's aimed at, to watch that, I think it can be destructive. Now that's my personal opinion. Right, yeah. And that doesn't mean that should be everyone's opinion. But my personal view is social media has a very, I don't know, funky way to portray that. Even I think there should be more filtering.
Right. What about like the Disney portrayal of men and women, the roles in society, children?
That's a funny one because I've seen, I think it was like head of creative at Disney say that they are trying to push certain agendas, which even 10 years ago was still seen as frowned upon. Where I think, here's the problem I personally have with it. Is if you put something in the face of children so much, they're going to normalize it and think that's what they should be. Yeah. So for example, I'm okay if someone's homosexual, if they want to be a transsexual, but if they're pushing that agenda to other people's children and they're making your favorite superheroes or Disney characters either transgender or homosexual, them kids look up to those characters at the end of the day. And you don't necessarily want them to associate the feeling of liking that character with them being either transgender or homosexual and thinking that's what they have to be to achieve those things. I don't want to see Spider-Man, for example, and that's me personally. I don't want to be Spider-Man, be homosexual, and my child sees that and thinks that's how you should be to be a superhero, where the two are actually disassociated and they shouldn't actually be combined.
So how do you balance that with society? So the agenda of like the wokeness where, oh, you're being intolerant, you're a bigot, you're a fascist.
It's funny though, because I think they say you're intolerant, but they only say that when it's in relation to something that they want to push. Because for example, as Muslims, wearing hijab is not tolerated in a lot of places. And I think they can't tolerate that. But as soon as you say something that they don't agree with and it's not pushing their agenda, you're seen as like a demon. Where if I don't want my child to learn about gender neutral or 100 different genders that now exist, I'm seen as a bigot or I'm seen as someone who's biased. But I'm just like, no, it's just not something I want to teach my children. And half the time, because you don't have control over the media, the school, and what they're exposed to outside of your own teaching, I think you almost get villainized by going against the grain. And the grain is now something that I don't think
what's interesting is
should be pushed.
The mass populations around the world don't agree with this agenda.
Yes.
If you ask Joe Blogs on the road, they don't usually agree with this.
Yeah, they don't.
So
they don't.
Your whole idea around what the media is doing, I think a lot of people agree with that. But is that something that you've got against gay people? Do you hate gay people?
No, absolutely not. I don't have a problem with gay people at all. And it's something, if they're choosing to be that way, that's completely fine. But pushing it through the media and pushing it to children especially, I think that's where the problem arises, because there should be levels. I've seen some shows where there's drag queens and transgender people doing very dressed inappropriately, performing in front of children, and people are thinking this is okay. And even if that was a straight version of that, I still wouldn't say
so you're saying
do
it's
that.
a sexualization of children you've got a problem with?
Yes, I 100% think that pushing certain types of agenda to children, especially the sexuality thing, the gender thing, I think it's detrimental to the child. And you got kids asking, can I be a girl? Can I be a boy? When they're the opposite gender. And it's like, them questions should never arise at that age. Where I'm saying you could teach someone to be tolerant of someone who's gay, homosexual, transsexual. You can teach them about tolerance, but normalizing it, I personally still don't think it's a normalized thing. So you shouldn't push that agenda.
Do you think it's affecting the innocence of children?
100%. Yeah. And I think that's why in Islam, it sort of conflicts. If I'm teaching my children certain things and they're in school getting taught something else, it sort of conflicts. And I think both should be accounted for, not just pushing one agenda on the media of so much of it getting exposed in every movie, in every cartoon. There's some character that's either homosexual, transgender, or gender neutral. And I understand people are trying to sort of build tolerance to that, but some things just you shouldn't build tolerance to.
But do we live in a world where it's not just a tolerance, but do you believe there's a world where there's another agenda, a bit like the Matrix? Do you think there are people in this world who want to create a society in a certain way?
Absolutely,
so, like
absolutely.
Break the family nucleus.
Absolutely. And I think I've spoken recently to someone about this. I think the traditional way of how people used to live, I think it's now getting tarnished. For example, a traditional woman who sacrifices and stays at home and looks after children and raises children, it's now slandered, where I fully respect it. I'm like,
is a woman failure if she stays at home?
Absolutely not. I think it's even harder to do that, because the sacrifice and the amount of sheer hard work you have to do to stay at home, raise children, and bind that family together, I think we should be celebrating that more than pushing this agenda of everyone should go work, make your own money, you don't need men don't need women. And it's creating a society of everyone thinks that it should be on the same level, same equal, and everyone should make money. And I think it's a bigger agenda that they're trying to push, to break up the family home, to make everyone just be robots to work, to make them money. And I just think that's just my personal opinion.
I had a discussion with some university young sisters, uni students, and I said, if you had a husband who could provide for you and you didn't have to work the rest of your life, would you work? And they were all saying we would work. We'd do the 9 to 5. And one sister said, no, I wouldn't work. And they all attacked her.
Yeah, and that's the issue. I think social media has pushed that agenda a lot, because you're seeing people that pretend, a lot of it is pretend on social media, that they've got the money and they're doing their own thing. Yeah. But relying on your partner and having a male counterpart or a female counterpart that you rely on certain things, and having that family unit and having that relationship, I think should be celebrated more often than to slander people that say, like the sister did, that says, no, I wouldn't want to work, because I think it's almost a scam to say, I need to go work 9 till 5 to make money because that's what it should be. And I'm like, no, like
some people see 9 to 5 as slavery. It's, well,
it sort of is. I mean, ideally, if I ask you, would you like to work or not, but all your bills are taken care of, you should technically say, no, I'll just, my bills are taken care of. And as a man, I feel like we should provide that for our lady, and vice versa. That comes with its own responsibilities as a female.
So what does feminism mean to you?
Feminism, what does it mean to me? I personally think that this whole feminism agenda has been pushed in a way to fool people into thinking that the people who are feminists are pro-women. But I think if you actually go deep enough, you realize that the feminism movement in itself is actually hurting women to the point where right now I can identify as a female and take away any rights that a woman actually should have and the benefits that she should have. But this feminist movement thing is being so blurred. And again, that's another problem with social media. Anyone can have a voice and anyone can have an opinion. So you're bombarded with so much different opinions now that it's hard to filter.
But do you think it's when everyone's busy arguing, pro-Tate, anti-Tate, feminism, all of these ideas, do you think whilst we're bickering on Twitter,
bigger things are happening in the background?
Bigger things are happening.
Absolutely. I think distraction is a form of tool that's been used.
It's divide and rule on social media.
100%. I think they push their agenda with the whole pandemic situation. They always trying to distract you, and major things tend to happen when these things are going on, which obviously I understand. Imagine if you're trying to get your child to not do something, you might distract them and say, yeah, look what's on the TV. Yeah, look over there. So it's just the same tactic where they use fear and they use distraction to try and cover the wool over your eyes to do something that's bigger. And I think in place of power, you always want more power, and people abuse power. And the problem now becomes, because there's so much media and social media, you don't know if you can trust the top to trickle down the correct information.
So you're talking about that censorship on social media, because you're a social media guy. We'll talk about that after the break, but really interesting discussion.
Cool, thank you.
Let's go to a break. This is Dr. Deen's Real Talk. I'll see you in a minute. So again, welcome back to Real Talk with our guest, Medz, the social media expert. So you've had a social media channel with the cooking whole genre and other stuff.
Not cooking. We eat food, and it started out as an app, and then we just ventured into the YouTube. Right. And
the whole thing about showing off what you're eating, where you're going, what you're doing, is it healthy for people to do that? You post everything that they do?
It's a tough question to ask or to answer, I should say, because there's so much of it out there that people, I think, are bored of watching everyone show what they're eating, what they're doing. But we have a specific channel that just obviously tries to showcase, because previous to pandemic, everything was closing down. No one was going to restaurants. Everyone was using apps to order their food. No one was actually socializing. So when we launched the app, COVID hit, so we had to close down the app. But we realized that the YouTube channel was helping people discover restaurants that they might have not discovered pre-pandemic, because people realized, oh my God, the freedom's gone, and I need to do things I never used to do before. So just giving them that platform to see different restaurants that they might have not visited, different types of food that they might not have tasted through our channel. I think that's what was important. I don't personally think you should post a picture of everything you're eating if it's just a bagel that you eat in the morning. But if you're going to dedicate a channel, because we spend time, we spend our own money, we spend a lot of hours editing our videos to bring the best content, and we find genuinely the best places to eat for them to experience it through us.
Many times now I've seen this scenario where there's, let's say, a couple in a restaurant, and the guy wants to eat, he's hungry. And the girlfriend or wife saying, well, I need to take a picture. Get everything right on the table.
That's frustrating.
The food's gone cold.
That's frustrating. To be honest, we also have to eat semi-cold food because you have to get the shots. But if you're on a date or you're just with your partner.
A normal scenario.
Like, you need to relax.
The food's going to be cold. The guy's getting annoyed. He wants to eat. And she's like, no, I need to get this angle, and the food's gone cold.
No, I personally think people need to stop that. Eat your food. Maybe take a quick picture, but you can't disturb the meal.
So in terms of like where we are as a species, I'd say, because like the previous guest was saying, where the phone's an extension of our body now. This whole obsession with showing the world, that show reel, my life's amazing, when it might be miserable, you might be in a terrible state, you might have no money to pay for the bill, right? What is that leading to in terms of like every dynamic of society? So family, the marriage crisis we're under, how is social media affecting the issue with finding the right partner, showing your life how it is? In reality,
it puts pressure on people, definitely, to try and keep up with a certain status. So I deleted my personal social media now, because when I was playing basketball, I had to keep up with a certain image. But now that I don't have to do that, I just deleted it, because I realized how much pressure people are under to take that nice picture, even though, like you said, they can't necessarily afford it, or it's not in their lifestyle, but they're just portraying a certain way. And the strain it has on people's lives, let alone marriage and other things, is that number one, you have to keep up with the same image, and you have to constantly battle with your own mind to get that reassurance from people. Because when you post something and you get in the likes and the comments and views and things like that, I think mentally it stimulates you to a point where you're almost looking for that adrenaline rush, that drug, which is actually a drug where it's a dopamine level spike, where you see that notification say you've just had 20 more likes. Is it stressful
constantly having to update your social media?
I think it's stressful for people. I definitely think it's stressful for people, and it becomes a repetitive thing, and it becomes almost a job. Unless this is your actual job. I think it becomes a chore for people, definitely, because you're now thinking, oh my God, that post that I made when I went to this restaurant, or when I posted this, got this many likes, but the one that was neutral and it wasn't something amazing got 2 likes. So now you're constantly now battling that battle as well, where you're thinking, I need to get people's attention, or I need to get more likes, I need to get more comments, and it's not healthy. Not healthy.
The way I see social media is like Islamically, like if I post a video for 30 seconds and 10,000 people see it, I see the time that's taken up of people, and if it wasn't useful, I'm accountable for that time I wasted of people's life. 30 seconds time 10,000, that's hours and hours of people's time I took away from their life, which I can't get back, and I feel accountable for that. I don't know why people don't see it that way, but we are accountable.
I think because humans are selfish. I think all humans are just innately going to be selfish, unless you obviously have a filter system or a moral system that you are conscious about to filter and have that conscious of, for example, you saying I wasted people's time, but not everyone has that filter. So the problem becomes people just posting everything, not taking accountability for wasting people's time.
You deleted your account. I've taken a 2-year break from TikTok, and it's been the best, most peaceful years of my life. So when you leave social media, you feel so amazing. You're so free of the stresses of constantly watching things and posting things, editing things, and all that tension. I need to post this. I need to post everything. So you can see a stabbing. You won't save the person. You'll just video it, right?
Yeah, and
it's a sick
absolutely
world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I was, like I said, when I was in as an athlete, my agents were on there, other teams and social. You had to keep up a certain image.
Let's talk about that basketball career. So what was that like? So who plays basketball in England?
That's the problem. I think it's an interesting topic, especially when you talk about in England. But England's not known for their basketball. And especially back when I was growing up, there was no social media. There was no real direct route for you to loving a sport and having a direct path to becoming a professional basketball player that makes enough money for you to sustain that. So I had to go to Durham for an academy when I was 16, instantly hit with racism.
Wow, what was that like?
It was terrible, man. Like we carpooled up, because obviously you understand back then, maybe like 15, 16 years ago, in certain areas where I was in Durham initially, they'd not seen briefly. I'll tell you why I got kicked out because of racism, but a car pulled up, hurling abuse, calling us all sorts of names. I was with 7 of my black friends, 1 white friend and myself, and they were hurling all sorts of racist abuse towards me. They were obviously, because of the way I look, they assumed whatever I was, and they were hurling abuse, chased us. There was a whole kerfuffle about it, and we got kicked out, even though they pulled guns on us. Like they pulled everything. It was crazy. There was bats. They chased us around, and it was
chasing you with bats.
I had to run into the forest, hide, and go back to our dorm rooms.
In England.
And I would never forget it. And it was like one of my first real experiences.
So some racist guys come with bats, chasing you into the forest. How many of you?
There was 7, 8 of us, but we were young. We were like 16 years old.
And they were older.
They're fully grown men. There was 5 of them. So they dropped off one guy, came back for us, so we can't run either end.
Then what happened?
So once they chased us, we then went back to the dorm room, told the people that are obviously in charge, and then they blamed us for it, saying, "Oh, why were you walking at that time of night and things like that?" And we were confused and we were just like baffled. So then they told us that it's not going to be a problem, but then they eventually kicked us out to make an example out of us. And I've never been in trouble in my life, so it was just a shock to me. I had to go back home to my mum and just cry my eyes out and say, look, basketball is the only thing I'm passionate about. So I ended up going into Nottingham to train there to then become a professional basketball player. when I hit 23. And even then, when I became a professional, when I played in Germany, for example, going through the airport, they do random checks. And it's like, it's not random anymore. I went through so many flights that I was like, you're just literally singling me out. Where to an extent, I can understand back in the day why people were ignorant and they thought this person looks a certain type of way. And even though Islam is a religion and anyone could be Muslim, I think because I looked a certain way, they obviously linked Islam to me. And because of everything that was happening around the world, everyone was high alert on someone who didn't need to have high alert on. Like I remember going to New York for the first time in my life when I was 17. I went to a camp and we traveled through America. And I'm 17 years old. I've got my basketball gear on. I am not a threat to anyone. All my friends get let through. And in New York, it was fine. In Chicago, they put me in a little room.
Wow.
And the way I got treated, 100%, the way I got treated, they were like, they pretty much were insinuating that I am a terrorist threat. And it's like when you take it to that level as a 17-year-old, I'm worried, I'm scared, and they're like telling me they're gonna ban me from this country, and I'm like, I haven't done anything, like I'm just passing through. But obviously, as a British Iranian Muslim, they weren't cool with that, and it was obviously at a heightened time where everyone was sensitive.
What did you say? What did you say to them?
Well, I just told them the truth of going to the basketball camp with a bunch of people, and after they made us miss our flight.
Were you scared?
100%, because you're in a uncomfortable scenario where you've never been and you don't know what's gonna happen. And at 17, you might think you're old, but you have no clue about real life. So facing those things, it becomes challenging.
Did you get a call to your family?
No, you get no calls, man. You get no calls. They put me in a room, isolated me from everyone else as well. And back then, you didn't have some phones and social media. There was none of that. That was 15, 16 years ago. So it was scary, and you don't know what to do. They put you in a little room and you got to wait a couple hours till they interview you. And it's like 17, really? Like, so that's half the things you face. And it wasn't like it stopped then. I think it carried on. But luckily, like I said, with the social media thing, there's so much access to that now. I think people are scared to act a certain way. You're worried if you do something, I'm going to pull out my phone and record you. Where back in the day, there was none of that. When I was growing up, you couldn't just publicize the wrongdoings that you got done towards you.
So what's basketball been like for you in the UK?
I think for basketball players in the UK, it's been challenging up until recently. There's not necessarily, like I said, the right structure like they have in football, for example. But for me personally, the way I look has also been a hindering path to it, because if I looked a certain way, I won't have the battle of trying to at least get looked and seen as, where I'm looking like an Iranian guy who plays cricket. They're not even respecting me to even give me that chance, the opportunity to compete first. I have to prove myself to just be at zero. Then once I'm at zero, then I can now prove what I can do, where that's half the challenge of navigating through my religion, my faith, my background, my ethnicity, and trying to be a professional basketball player. And a part of it, the other challenge that people don't actually realize is I felt like I'm disappointing my family, because my brother's an aerospace engineer. And because I was artistic and I was into sport, telling my mom I want to be a professional basketball player, I think it felt like I'm disappointing her.
So are you a failure?
I don't think I'm a failure. I personally don't think I'm a failure. But in their eyes, I think our parents, I think our parents' generation is the final generation that's going to think that everyone should be doctors, dentists, lawyers, because finally we're realizing that you could be Amazon FBA affiliate selling things on Amazon, and you can make more money than someone who's a surgeon.
So how's your experience been of being an entrepreneur, setting up a business?
It's way more hard work than having a conventional job. I think
it's more enjoyable.
I say it's more enjoyable in certain milestones, when you hit certain milestones. The process is difficult. And I think whether that's basketball, whether that's the media stuff, whether that's the business side of things, I think you forget how obviously the process is important, and you forget to be in that moment.
But
hitting milestones, I think, gives you the satisfaction.
What's the journey of starting a business?
I think there's a lot of time and just dedication, and it's not just hard work. People think it's just hard work. I think hard work is sort of stupid. You have to do work smart, because sometimes it means taking a step back and handing something over to someone that knows better than you. Where if you just work hard and get nowhere, then you have a bunch of failing businesses. I've tried a lot. Busy fools. And I've been a busy fool, and I can't blame anyone else but myself, because I didn't think.
But was that a learning curve?
100%. 100%.
Does it take a few businesses to get it right sometimes?
I think most people that have accomplished anything in their life have failed a bunch of times. I think very rarely you find people that have become successful and have hit it the first time. So yeah, definitely a learning curve.
Medz, we're going to go to another break.
Okay.
This is amazing, really interesting. We'll see you after the break. Real Talk with Dr. Deen. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Real Talk. Medz, we're talking about business. People think it's easy to set up a business, or they're scared, or they don't have the knowledge. So it's all these scenarios. Everybody wants a business, or most people do, but they don't know how and where to start because you can't learn it at school. You only learn the theory at school.
Yeah.
So how do you set up a successful business?
I think that's an interesting topic. Firstly, that you spoke about school doesn't teach you. Like we never got taught about tax returns and mortgages and things like that. I think school is a separate subject that bothers me extremely with how things are set up and how they pretty much raise cattle in a way. It's like robots where everyone's just like A grade meat, B grade meat, where I know some people that done well in school that won't necessarily translate to the business life.
Yeah.
I think half of it becomes actually just doing it. If you have an idea and you're passionate about something, the first step is not to just talk about it, to start something and not be scared of that failure, because you're probably going to fail a bunch of times. Or even if you don't fail, you're going to have so many obstacles. But mostly I think it comes down to people are just comfortable, especially in this country. I think people are just comfortable. So there's a certain level of comfort that stops you from actually pursuing something that could be greater than your current situation.
So what skills do you need to leave a 9-to-5, start a business?
It's not necessarily a skill set. I think it's more of a mindset.
Right.
Because there's people with an array of different skills that make businesses that work, or at least change their life. Even like you said with the YouTube thing, you could technically become a YouTuber just off your own back and leave your 9-to-5 job, because you're going to provide a better life for yourself, working for yourself and earning potentially more with uncapped potential instead of your 9-to-5 job where you're limited and you're going to have to ask for a pay rise every year and see if you can move up. And there's just corporate ladder where it can be limiting. Where if you got your own business and you work for yourself, then that mindset, I think it's difficult because people, it's an unknown, right? And when it's unknown, it's scary to people.
Yeah.
But you have to try. I think if you have a business idea and you want to try it, do it alongside your whatever you're doing currently, and test the water and
before you
experiment
full time.
Because I've had many failed businesses. Some of them still work, some of them don't. Recently, I've had a failed business where we spent so much money on an app, and then finally we realized that the app works, but the end user, we have to wait for the restaurants to do and it was just costing us too much money. So you're gonna have to absorb the cost, absorb the time that you're going to put into the craft or the business, and just do it and see where it takes you.
People who don't know where to start in business, want to leave their job, where should they start?
I definitely think you should find out what, it's not necessarily about passion, but you want to find out if something that you're going to actually be dedicated to. Sometimes you don't have to have passion to make something work. It definitely helps. If you're passionate about something, I think you have a higher chance of making that work. But it's finding something that you're going to put the dedication in. So I think finding the time first and carving out an actual process of how I'm going to go about making this, at least have an attempt to be successful, is the most important thing. Because I can sit here and tell you, okay, write down a bunch of different ideas, then you have to then find out what your competition is, what the profit margins will be, and all these other things. But that's irrelevant if you're not going to actually put the time in to make that work, because everything then becomes theory. And when you have theory, it's just the theory.
So let's talk a bit more about another topic, about the social media and censorship, what can be said, what can't be said, all of that. So Andrew Tate has obviously been released, and Tristan Tate. What are your thoughts on that?
I personally listen to a lot of the Andrew Tate podcast, and obviously the things that he said, along with, I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson, these type of guys who tend to be on the other end of the scale. And even though I don't agree with 100% of what everyone says, I think, number one, his delivery has been in a way where it captures people's attention. And I think a lot of people get taken back by that and they dislike him. But if you actually hear what he's saying, I think 95% of what he says is absolutely amazing and factual. And the more people listen to unedited content of people like Andrew Tate, they would understand that the greater message, the reason why it gets shut down is because they don't want you to think that way. They want you to conform to what they want you to believe. And it almost sounds like a conspiracy theory when we say the Matrix or things like that, but when you actually see why certain people get banned for for comments that should never be banned. There's worse comments and there's worse content that doesn't get banned. I guarantee you. But because it doesn't push their own agenda, I think they ban it.
Well, on social media currently on YouTube, you can promote stabbings, drugs. No, nothing's banned there. Do you have children?
I do. I've got 2 daughters.
And how is that being a father?
The best thing I ever done. The best thing I absolutely, hands down, I ever done.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes you more passionate about society today, is the censorship and the filtership, whether that's through school, social media, cartoons, TV. It scares you because we grew up on a certain different filtership, but now what's getting portrayed out there and what's censored and what's shown, it scares me because I'm like, if I, God forbid, I'm not there for my daughters and someone else has to take that role or the school has to educate them, it becomes a very challenging thought of you're trusting other people to do right by your kids or a generation of people. And I don't think that's
for your kids on media, social media, phones, iPads.
So the rule, I used to be one of those parents before I had kids, is I would be like, they're never going to watch YouTube. They're never going to. I think you, as a parent, you start to realize you can't be that militant.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't anyway, as my personal experience, because they're going to see cartoons. They're going to want to watch certain things. I think you as a parent have to be very mindful of what you're exposing them to. And if they do steer in the wrong direction, to quickly correct that, because you can't necessarily stop something being shown that you're not on it, because I'm not going to sit there watching all the cartoons. But as soon as you become aware of that, you have to then filter that straight away or answer questions. When my daughter one time asked me a question of, can I be a man? She was like, am I a boy? And I was like, let me tell you very, very clearly. It doesn't matter what you think, you will never ever be a boy. Now you might feel like you are, but you can't be a boy. Your chromosomes, your DNA is built, you're only going to be female. And I know that's going to be wild to some people.
What did she say to that, your daughter?
I think that they're at a stage right now, it's confusing to them. So she doesn't really understand. She was like, oh, is Baba a woman? Is Baba a mama? And I was like, no, Baba can't be a mama. I'm only going to be your Baba. Like, I'm going to be your dad. I can't change that. So I think understanding that there's going to be conflict of what they're seeing, like school, I was talking to one of the schools and saying, I don't necessarily want them to get exposed to certain curriculums at that age. And I don't think they liked it. Well, I can surely dictate what you teach to my kids to a certain extent.
Do you think that kids are being drilled in with social media, even the school system? Do you think it's tough for kids?
I think they don't realize that it's tough because it's what they just live with. But
are kids confused nowadays with all the pressure?
100%. Because back in our day, I sound like an old head when I say this, but back in our day, there was none of this getting pushed as much as it is now. Certain things were still considered. Like, I'm not saying don't, like, if you're homosexual, if you're transsexual, if you're whatever you are, that's fine. But as soon as you start to make other people buy into your own delusions and say, if you were to say to me right now, you're a woman and I've got to call you she, why do I have to abide to that? And that's unfair on everyone else, because you're now causing confusion. Because if it's a child that's got to do that now, the child is thinking, wait, so is Mr. Deen, like, is he a woman? Like,
can I identify as a chair?
You can. This is the thing that people don't understand. You can identify as a chair. Now, do I have to call you a chair? Hell no. Like, I do not have to call you a chair. I do not have to buy into your fantasy, because then that's going to be a really weird, blurry line that then you're going to... So, for example, I was parked in a disabled spot by accident and I didn't realize. And the lady came up to me, she's like, you're parked in a disabled spot. Should I say I identify as a disabled person for the 5 minutes that I'm in Tesco? So no, I can't do that. Like, it's going to be really a blurry line, and it's going to be scary for people if we don't address that. And I think the more people you speak to, everyone thinks the same. They're like, no, you can't do that. But the media, the way they portray is, no, you should respect. If I want to get called a whale today, you better call me a whale.
Yeah. Or if I want to identify as disabled, like you said, we should accept me as disabled, even though I'm not. Physically, I'm not. Scientifically, I'm not. But I could say I'm disabled. I identify as a disabled person.
Yeah. And I think there's certain people that genuinely have mental issues that they can't physically help themselves, and they have problems. And I understand that. And to those people that have been diagnosed and have gone to rigorous different doctors and treatments to get that corrected or get that looked at, fair enough. But a majority of the people, I think, abuse it now.
Right.
I think there's a case where a male criminal said he identifies as a female, and he's gone into a female prison. And it's scary. It's scary.
And then there was a backlash, and that's why they moved him out into.
Yeah, well, rightly so. There should be a backlash, right? Like, common sense tells you a man shouldn't be in a female prison. A man shouldn't be in a female toilet. My daughter, imagine being in school and a boy walks into the female toilets. Or there's a swimmer that identifies as a woman, and she was one of the young ladies was talking that this male big athletic dude came into the change rooms, and in the Olympics, I think it was, or one of the major competitions, she was shocked. She was like, we have to get changed in front of this man. And it's like, this is what I'm saying with the whole feminist movement thing. I think they're actually hurting what women's rights and things should be instead of helping it.
Especially what Islam offers women.
Absolutely. And I think that's why Islam, the more I've grown up, the more, because sometimes you're born into a religion, right? You can't help what religion you're born into. But the older you get, the more you start to research and the more you realize that Islam...
After the break, hold that thought.
Okay.
I'll see you after the break. This is Dr. Deen's Real Talk. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Real Talk with Dr. Deen. So Medz, we're talking about children, how they're using their phones, what the pressure is from ideas and media. What do you think is a solution for our kids? How can we help them?
I think the solution firstly starts at home, and how you navigate through teaching your children about what you think they should be learning and what they should be exposed to. Definitely teaching that at home and realizing your moral set instead of their teachers being the primary moral set or the TV being the primary moral set. I think that's firstly important. And I think they need to give people the freedom that they talk about. If I don't want my child to learn about being gender neutral or having 100 different genders or being exposed to, I don't know, an array of different things, I should have that right. If you're truly telling me I'm free and I have control over certain things, then I should have certain rights of filtering what the typical education system or media system portrays.
Do you think there's white privilege in even talking about these subjects like gender? For example, Piers Morgan can say something, but if a Muslim says it, do you think it's addressed differently? So is there a white privilege when it comes to these issues?
I think there's a trickling effect of racism that spreads through different races and religions across a magnitude of different, either that's media, social media, or even platforms or work. There is some privilege. I don't know if it's white privilege more than, for example, someone just recently in Nottingham went around stabbing and running people over, and instantly people were like, Muslim.
Yeah.
He wasn't. But because media has portrayed so much of that fear, I think there is some things that other people can get away with saying where a Muslim might not be able to get away with it, or a black person might not be able to get away with saying, or other races. So I think there's definitely some racism that's just trickled everywhere, where it doesn't give us that privilege.
If Piers Morgan can challenge people like trans people, gender neutral debate and genders and 104 genders, if a Muslim scholar says that on TV, it's a bigger issue, but Piers Morgan can say it.
Yeah, because when Piers Morgan says it, they blame Piers Morgan as a person.
Right.
But when a Muslim says it, they blame an entire religion.
Right.
And I think that's disrespectful, number one. It's such a big generalization, and it actually takes the onus away from the individual who did that. So for example, if I'm an idiot and I'm causing destruction and just happen to be Muslim, you cannot instantly first thing you do is blame Islam.
Yeah.
They don't do that with any other races or any other religions or anything like that. So why do they do that with Islam? And they do that, unfortunately.
I saw a video just today of a refugee who'd hidden in the top of a car, in the container bit at the top where you can store your stuff. And he'd hidden in that and was crossing the border to the UK from France. And he got out, he knocked on the part of the car, and he runs. And the people got out of the car. They were shocked, obviously disturbed. There's a person above our car. But what the people's comments were on that video was, and the family itself were more concerned about their things in the box than the human being who's probably come from a terrible situation.
Yeah.
So what's that like in terms of like the mentality that, my things and devaluing another human being because they're not.
Yeah, I think I can definitely talk about my own experience of that because I was a refugee. I came to this country when I was almost 9 years old.
Yeah.
Didn't know a word of English. And obviously people don't understand these are human lives with human problems with a lot more going on than you think. They're not just trying to come in to your country just to occupy a space
but you coming to England to steal people's jobs?
Well, if I'm better at the job that you're going to do, then it doesn't matter whose job it is. I'm just better at the job.
Right.
You're not going to take Mr. X's job as a doctor, as a surgeon, if you're not a surgeon. Like, that's not your job. And if you are really good at that job, in today's society, I think you could get that job.
Right.
Not necessarily the exact same position just because they just happen to be there. They're not going to fire someone just to give you that role. But if you're truly good at what you do, you will get seen in today's society. Unless you're in like a third world country where you have no access. If you're in England, no one's coming to steal anyone's job. And this community only thrives because there's so many different people from different backgrounds and religions that build everything together. If you were to get rid of people like that, I think it would crumble.
But all these immigrants and foreigners and refugees are taking all our jobs. They are all on benefits. Is that true?
So that's a funny question. You should say that because when we came to this country, it was me, my brother, and my dad. My mom couldn't even come here for a year. My dad was an accountant. He was a qualified accountant. He was good at his job. When we came, he couldn't work. So you're forcing him not to work. So you could be like, the only thing you can get is benefits.
You're not allowed to work.
However much it is per month, which wasn't even enough. My dad was like, no, I want to work. Yeah. I come with a skill set. I'm not just coming to leech, but they wouldn't allow you to work. And what's funny is these people that are coming to England, especially, they're trying to better their life. They're not just trying to come and earn the little pennies that you're going to give to them on benefits. The benefit system's great up until a certain point, but these people want to actually work, make a living, send money back home, increase their quality of life. But if you're not allowing them and you're forcing them to get benefits, then it's the system's problem, not necessarily the people who are coming into the country.
Statistically, refugees are net positive to the economy.
100%, yeah, definitely.
Pay more taxes than
definitely, 100%.
What the media says.
The refugees coming into the community, I think, benefit the communities more than what they take away. And I think a lot of people, the old school, I think is a previous generation that still thinks block off the borders, build walls, do all these crazy things. But I think more and more people, I think the more time goes on, and there's another good thing that social media does is it exposes people to be realizing of they're not taking away from our society, they're adding to it.
Well, statistically it's proven that countries that are have opened borders to people from all over the world, bring in talent, bring in labor, bring in workers, their economies thrive. And that's the American story as well.
It makes sense. Once you close that and you basically, like with Brexit, for example, how many people were forced to leave because they couldn't live here, and they left some roles that now need filling. For example, I was speaking to a GP lady yesterday and she was saying how many GPs are now going to Australia once they qualify because here is just different. It's difficult for them, especially if they're coming from other countries like Africa or things like that. They get qualified and they have to go to another country that's more tolerant like Australia, which is sad because UK has a lot to offer.
But there's also an issue of a depopulation crisis. So people aren't having children anymore or very few kids. So there's going to be a lot of elderly people in the UK. And so they need people to work, and that's the only way to do that is immigrants. So politicians will say, for the masses to get the vote bank, that we're against refugees, but they open the borders. That's why they've had the highest number of people migrating to the UK this year. So they're saying one thing to get the vote, but practically they've opened the borders to allow people.
I think number one, people in their head when they hear immigrant, they're thinking they've got this warped perception because again, what media has portrayed to them for so many years, they've got this grotty looking guy coming and just leeching and sitting at home and just getting benefits, where they don't realize that a lot of these immigrants that you call, they come with an array of skill set, with a high level of education, and they're trying to do better, number one. And number two, it's like, why would you stop the growth of a country instead of like helping aid it? It's not your country. I don't look at, for example, I'm Iranian. Yeah. When people come into Iran, I'm like, it's not my country. If it betters the situation, just let it be instead of trying to hold borders. And I think it's just such an old school way of thinking. Hopefully it will change because it can only hurt the country.
You have a lot of Filipino doctors coming to the UK and working as nurses. They're happy to work as a nurse because their wages are so low in the Philippines. So there's a lot of people that are willing to come and add to society here. But this whole idea of open borders and that, do you think it's like God's earth, Allah's earth, and we should all be allowed to go where we want?
I think 100% you should be allowed to go where you want without limitation. unless you individually are causing some issues, that's the only time where government should interject and say, look, like, you're causing issue. Otherwise, just because someone comes as a refugee seeking refuge, which the term is refugee, you're coming to seek refuge from something that obviously is a worse situation, you shouldn't get penalized, you shouldn't get frowned upon, you shouldn't look down upon. And a lot of people that voted for Brexit, I think it was the inner racism that triggered that, instead of actually realizing, oh my God, this is actually hurting the economy, our economy, more than it is helping it, by just blocking off borders.
So are Muslims, refugees, migrants, are they like a scapegoat for politicians so they can get on with all of their corruption, get on with what they're doing, whilst we all focus on the boogeyman?
Yeah, I think they do use that as a major distraction. I definitely do think they use that as a major distraction. Anything that happens, once in a while, you get this major Islamophobia pushed on people just to almost cover other things that happen. Because you pay attention to that more if it's continuously pushed than something that slips the news. And I think they're worried now because of social media and how accessible it is to someone just pulling out their phone and posting something. I think the dynamic is sort of changing. Before, you could literally funnel whatever you wanted people to see, and there was no other form of rectifying that, justifying it, or figuring out if it's correct or not. Now you got Google, you got Instagram, you got TikTok, you got YouTube, you got Facebook, you got all these new platforms that I can literally type something in and make sure what you're saying to me on TV is correct. Same thing happened with the pandemic. Same thing's happening with multiple different things right now that's happening around the world.
So give us some life advice. What have you learned in your journey that could help others?
What have I learned through my journey? I think because I've luckily or unfortunately done so many different things in my life, it's hard to distinguish one or two things, or from one path. I've taken so many different things from the different things I've done.
Give me 3 tips.
3 tips. I think, let me think about this one before I tell you something that I'm going to regret for the rest of my life.
No. What would you advise your younger self, or your brother, or your best friend?
My younger self, I would definitely tell to not second guess things and just go with what you think is correct. Just go with it and do it. Don't be scared. I think the fear of a lot of things holds people back to achieve what they want to achieve. And I'm still, to this day, I'm still struggling and battling with that, of fear of not knowing, or fear of something failing, or something not going how I planned, to hold me back. I think letting that go is the first step to bettering your life in a lot of ways, whether that's business, whether that's I don't know, sport, or something else that you want to do. I think just doing it and exploring it, I think is great. What I'll tell my friend or family, I think it's a difficult one, because I can only talk about my own personal experience. Your life is going to be different to mine, right? And we're going to have completely different paths that we've taken. I think 2 other advices that I'd give to people is definitely travel a lot and explore everyone's culture and what they say, and listen to other people. Like, I can learn from you, and you can learn from everyone. And thirdly, it's a tough one. I'm gonna say something like along the lines of get out of the matrix. But that's not to sound cliche. It's just that when you actually step back from life and you watch some people go through their 9 to 5 and they're now 60 doing a dead-end job that they've never enjoyed, and at the end of it, what have you actually done that you're happy about? It's like me looking at my children and taking a step back and realizing the most important thing is spending time with them, educating them and bettering their life, instead of just a 9 to 5. The 9 to 5 can be enjoyed. My job right now, I work for Asheville. It's amazing. It gives you creativity. It gives you a lot of more opportunity than your 9 to 5 job that might be suppressing you. But actually breaking out of that and realizing there's more to life than just doing the things that they think that they tell you should be doing. Get a good grade, go to school, get a little house, and just live that. I think the more people realize they can break out of that and do better and bigger things.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's such a great inspiration, Medz. Thank you for your time. That was Real Talk with Dr. Deen. See you for the next episode. Don't miss it. Assalamu alaikum.